Welcome to the Hey Docs podcast with your host, Jill Allen. Today, I am so excited to have a couple of my past clients, Dr. Stephen Oliver and Dr. James Donaghey, on the show to discuss their recent practice acquisition. With James transitioning towards retirement and Stephen stepping into ownership, they will share their insights on the challenges, surprises, and key strategies for making a smooth practice transition. Let's get into it. Are you feeling the squeeze from declining starts and cash flow as costs continue to rise? Building on their industry-leading patient acquisition, insurance management, and collections solution, OrthoFi is delivering groundbreaking innovations to keep your practice thriving. OrthoFi's latest feature, iMax, allows you to maximize every insurance claim submission, adding tens of thousands of dollars to your annual production. Plus, with the game-changing combo of FPT10 and third-party financing, OrthoFi is making it even easier for patients to say yes to treatment while ensuring steady cash flow for your practice. OrthoFi's commitment to your success in today's evolving orthodontic landscape is why I recommend them to my clients, and right now is the best time to get started. Visit startmoresmiles.com and use promo code HeyDocs to get 50% off your implementation. Hey Docs, on this podcast, I talk about a lot of different ways you can set your practice apart. But here's one that might surprise you. Maybe you haven't thought about it before, but the equipment you use can make a big difference. Not just for the patient experience, but for you and your team too. That's why I want to let you know about a new line of orthodontic equipment from ADEC. I visited their headquarters in Oregon earlier this year to take a sneak peek for myself, and I have to say, I was impressed. ADEC has manufactured award-winning dental equipment for 60 plus years, and they're bringing that same level of excellence to ortho. From comfortable, compact patient chairs to a versatile workstation and delivery to ergonomic dental stools, ADEC orthodontic equipment is designed for a smooth and easy workflow. Day after day, patient after patient, see the difference it can make for your practice. Click the link in our show notes to learn more about ADEC Orthodontic Solutions. Everybody, Jim, Stephen, I am so excited to have you on Hey Docs. Thanks for being here today.
Glad to be here with you, Jill.
Thanks for having us.
I have been so looking forward to doing this podcast with you guys. And I know it's been a long time coming. I'm just so excited that you are going to share some of your knowledge with the audience today. So the way I like to start off Hey Docs is to just have my guests tell a little bit about themselves and where you're at right now in your practice.
I think I'll work backwards and just say a year and a half or a little bit more than a year and a half into the actual transition, more than 2 years since Stephen joined the practice. I'm thrilled. Everything's been wonderful. So currently I work usually about 2 days a week for Oyster Orthodontics, which is Dr. Stephen Oliver is the principal. I love that. I have a lot of time to spend with my wife in our houses, and I have a lot of time which I've never had before in my life. Going backwards, I was fortunate enough to bring Stephen in the summer of 2022. I graduated from the Department of Orthodontics at St. Louis University in 1984. And did a startup at a space about 3/4 of a mile from here. In 1991, as the practice grew, we built this office. I started at the old place with one employee and a portable radio. We did it by hand, but we learned along the way. I was also blessed to start adding employees that stayed with me a long time. One that I added after a couple of years is still here. He does wonderful work at the chairs. So we built this office in 1991 and used Total Health Environments in Austin, Texas to help us build the office. And we grew into it and then grew over it. And then at times in 2007 and 2008, when the economy changed, we certainly felt that and then came back to build it up again. And eventually, as I got older, started thinking ahead for transition. I brought Jill Allen and Associates on to help me manage things I just didn't want to manage anymore. and then came to the transition time and was lucky enough to find Steve and Oliver. So if that's enough of what you need from
That's
me,
beautiful.
that's what I got.
Yeah, perfect. All right, Stephen, take it away.
I'll start from the beginning. I grew up right outside of Nashville and then went to school at Alabama, where I met my wife there. I did my dental school at UAB here in Alabama. I took a different path after dental school and did the Air Force as a general dentist for about 4 years. I traveled to Colorado and then lived overseas for 3 years in Italy at an Air Force base over there, and made the decision, always had the inkling of wanting to go back and specialize in orthodontics, and made that decision while I was based in Italy. So I went back to residency in Chapel Hill at UNC and had a great time there. While I was going through that whole process of residency, and we were trying to figure out where Louise, my wife, and I were going to end up after residency, started talking with Dr. Donaghey some, my wife's orthodontist growing up as well. And we had the conversations of what kind of, does our timeline match up? Could this be a possibility? So we started that then. And as things matured more through my residency and we decided where we were going to be, the conversations changed a little bit more and got a little bit more serious. Ended up moving back to Mobile, and we've been here for a little over 2 years now. So that's the down and dirty of how we got here.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. So the way I'd like to take it today is, Jim, if you don't mind, I'm going to start with you, and we're just going to take our listeners through what it is like to start thinking about doing an acquisition from a senior doc standpoint. And then Stephen talk to you about what it was like coming in and taking over a practice. One of the things, Jim, I wanted to start talking about was, you alluded to it in your intro, but just what prompted you to start thinking about your decision to transition out? What were some of those things you were thinking about as you were thinking about, okay, I'm going to be transitioning, I'm going to be selling my practice, and I'm going to be entering retirement, and what does that look like for me? Do you mind just giving us a little bit of look into your mind and what was going on as you were thinking through all of that?
Yes, I don't mind at all. And it was a constant thought once it got there.
Mm-hmm.
I drink a cup of coffee and walk my dogs in the morning, and I would think about this nonstop, more than I really wanted, to be honest with you, because it's coming. The first thing is just age. If anybody was listening and heard the 1984, on October 15th, I will have been practicing here in Mobile. You had to think of it that way. Referral changes were real. Mm-hmm. My friends were getting older. To show you how much orthodontics is appreciated, or people are maybe a little jealous of it, two of my big referrers, their sons became orthodontists. Wow. There was a natural loss of a large part of our referral base. That was a challenge. When I met you, at the referral from a very dear colleague and friend of mine and a friend of yours, and brought you on, I just, as I got older, didn't want to deal with some of the things in the practice anymore. Mm-hmm. I loved our relationship, and you helped me so much.
Thank you.
So from a management standpoint, from a marketing standpoint, from a staffing standpoint, had to recreate our new patient coordinator because our long-term one retired. And that was a very big and a very wonderful experience and a big deal. And then to show you that there's always a little nepotism or inbreeding in Mobile, Alabama, it's wonderful that Stephen's from another city, because my CPA and business advisor was constantly on me about my transition plan. And he told me he was working on his, which I didn't really pay any attention to. It just so happens that ultimately that CPA and business consultant is Stephen's father-in-law. So Stephen's a dentist in the Air Force. His wife is one of my daughter's best friends. My daughter went to visit them when he was stationed in Italy in the Air Force. And in that time, Stephen's father-in-law said, we had lunch, and he said, Stephen's thinking about orthodontics. How would that time work for you? By magic, it was perfect, because my son, who's a dentist, he practices in Auburn, Alabama, and loves dentistry, and thought he might come back, but really liked dentistry. And he has a wonderful practice in Auburn. So it wasn't him. I had a nephew that expressed some interest, but I didn't want to work long enough for him to get through. So it just happened that this relationship was preordained, or it really fell in our laps. So very grateful for that. So that's how the thought went. How do I sell? What do I do? But there was a little pressure to just keep the practice at a level that was going to be worth selling at the level that I wanted to sell it.
And I, having worked with you for multiple years as we were leading up to this, that is something that when I'm working with doctors who are in your shoes, that is absolutely something we're working on. I always say that those 3 years of P&Ls, we have to get the practice looking and at a place where it is where other doctors are going to want to look at purchasing it from us. And so I love that you took the time ahead of time to be thinking about this, because I talk to a lot of docs who say, hey, Jill, I want to sell my practice, or I want to do this and I want to do this in 6 months. That can be tough if things aren't cleaned up and we don't have the right systems and team members in place. We worked a lot to set it up so that Stephen, or whoever that doctor was going to be, I don't know in the beginning that we knew it was going to be Stephen, but that we were handing them this really beautiful package wrapped up, and they were going to be able to step in and just take it and rock and roll with it.
Yeah, man, I appreciate your help throughout that, because one of the problems is keeping the whole thing confidential. Even if it wasn't Stephen, you couldn't really mention that you were going to transition, because that's going to affect referrals, public perception. Thank you for being my confidant throughout.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little about some of the hurdles you faced once the decision was made to sell the practice, and some things we had to work through, especially in regard to preparing to sell the practice. You want to talk a little about that?
The biggest one was referral patterns and keeping
Yes.
the practice at the level where it had the value that I wanted it to have, and to make it attractive to somebody to come in and purchase it.
Yeah.
That's where you were helping me, and you would just tease me and say, all you ever talk about is growth. And because at one point, that's what was the most important, the way the referral patterns changed. That was real. We also have sustained, we're treating second generations. And so that kind of sustains the practice also. I don't know whether that means you did real well or you're just old. A lot of our previous patients, their kids are our patients. And a lot of those we've finished already. So that was a good thing. But once we made the decision, one of the biggest hurdles for me was keeping everything secret. It really felt like I was living a lie. Stephen and I talked for 3 years with the permission for either of us to back away. But we were saying, as long as we're talking, let's just keep going. Anytime he was stateside from Italy, we got together. He came back to the United States.
Your point about keeping it secret, it is. And I've had so many docs say that. I feel like like you said, I'm living a lie here. I'm a double agent, because we have to be very cautious about what we're saying to team members. So you're having, I almost call it the closet phone calls, locking yourself away in the office or doing calls on the weekends, because perception is everything when getting ready to sell a practice. And I think, especially when you think about even with the referral pattern, I've had so many doctors that have had the word get out before they were ready to have it get out. And we all know we've got a small industry, and it just spreads like wildfire. Oh, somebody's retiring, and don't send them patients anymore because they're not going to be there. That's absolutely not what we want to have happen. What we want is for our dentists to know you're here to the very end, and you're going to have this beautiful transition with the junior doc coming in, and you're hoping ideally to pave that path for them to continue to have those referrals. Now, of course, Stephen, it's always up to you to cultivate and continue on that relationship. But I think, Jim, as you were going through it, trying to not say too much to your referring docs, but yet knowing in the back of your mind, okay, I'm not going to be here. And
At the risk of jumping ahead in the conversation, talked about hiring you, your associates, to manage things for me. Guys, I just got tired of the referral game. And it's so encouraging to see Stephen, who's not tired of it, and is so much better at being present with these guys. It comes down to digital technology. I'd make a phone call to a dentist. You might finally talk to him after 3 chases a week later. They just text each other. He's talking to these people all the time. And I'm like, why didn't I think about that? But that's just not the way we operated. So I'm as frustrated or just tired of that as I was. I'm amazed. He's wonderful at it. And it's really a joy to watch him develop these new relationships.
You're exactly right. It is a different generation in how we communicate, as maybe some of your peers were retiring and new docs are coming in. There is a bit of a disconnect sometimes in trying to connect with them. to continue to forge those relationships. One of the other things I wanted to talk about in preparing to help with the sale is looked at a lot of the systems you had in place and thought about how do we update these systems, or how do we just make this again an easier transition for a younger doc coming in who is maybe more tech savvy and ready to jump in. I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about Ed, because it was stressful for you. I think it was stressful on
Well,
the
let me
team.
let me translate this question to your listeners. Why didn't you allow me to make your practice paperless? It was just one of those steps I just didn't want to take. But on the other hand, we were ready for it. We did everything else, and you brought our systems up, and that was good, and you pushed our staff on it. And the proof was when we had the practice valuation done, it was clean, clear, and the numbers were there. Yeah. I might have still been writing a paragraph about wire changes in every chart every day, but that was me. I knew the practice had to go digital. I just didn't want to do it. Other than that, unless you can remember something, Jill went through those systems and we got that done.
When I think about how we transitioned the new patient experience and what we were doing
Absolutely.
From there, you had a great process, but just being able to condense it and bring it up to date to make it so we could see more patients. I think even those little things really enhanced that. I think that directly affected our starts and our conversions, and just again taking us, it's all about what's that P&L says when you're looking at the evaluation. Would you agree?
I would, but I'm leaving something out that you helped us with so much, and that was paying so much attention to the schedule itself, block scheduling. And of course, it never seems to work 100%, but it certainly worked a lot better than it was before. And it gives us staff guidelines and made a big difference. And I think that helped us get our numbers in order also.
Yeah, for sure. So let's switch directions now and talk about what were some of the biggest surprises as you and Stephen were coming together and bringing him into the practice, and some of the things that you were like, wow, I didn't expect this to go so well.
First of all, I just couldn't. You're in practice by yourself for a reason. You have your opinions on everything and the way it should go. I didn't expect to get along with Stephen so well. And to this day, we've got along beautifully, to the best of my knowledge.
Sure, I would agree.
We haven't really talked about leading up to talk about something after he came. I think this is a good example. One of the things that some of my colleagues had told me when they took on new orthodontists was, oh my gosh, when you see the way they put brackets on, you're going to lose your mind. Okay, so put that on. Now, I know we're jumping ahead because we haven't even got to help. You asked, and I got to tell you this.
Yeah, I love it. This is perfect.
So the first day, Jill says, okay, for the first 6 weeks, he'll observe, and then you ease them on into it. Stephen's first day was July the 5th. July is the busiest month of the year. And we had new patient starts and just a great month. And maybe not a full arch start, but maybe somebody's getting their lower appliances on or whatever it was. And it's probably 9:30 in the morning. And I'm going to a new patient. I just said, Stephen, will you bond that? So he says, sure. And after I came out and checked the wire, when the person had put it in, it was like, did he bond that or did I bond that? It was perfect.
Love it.
And I'm like, party is on. That 6 weeks lasted an hour and a half because he was part of the practice and working right then. So that was a surprise.
Yeah, that's great. It is. You touched on it. We definitely had a way that we were working through bringing Stephen in. And I think that's the beauty of it. It's an outline for how we bring doctors in and assimilate them into the practice. How wonderful, Stephen, for you to just be able to jump right in. And it wasn't an issue clinically, which I think, like you said, Jim, that is definitely something I hear a lot, where docs struggle with differences in treatments and differences in how senior doc does things to how junior doc is coming in and how they've been trained, and they can have a lot of conflict there. So it was really nice to see that was not an issue. Stephen, I promise I'm going to bring you into this conversation. But Jim, the last thing I wanted to ask before I move over to Stephen, because I get asked this a lot from my senior docs when they're trying to make this transition decision, is should I sell privately or should I sell to a DSO or an OSO? And we're all in the Facebook groups, and it feels like there's nobody in the middle there. And I'm curious if you can talk to our audience a little bit about why you chose to go privately. You definitely had a practice that could have been sold as a DSO or an OSO.
So what I say here is going to be 50% spot on and 50% idiot. There's really not a lot of gray in there. I was advised by knowledgeable and wonderful colleagues with practices a lot bigger than mine. My practice is very average size to go with the DSO. I didn't really have anybody say, just sell it to somebody, except that had been the model that was always in my mind. So I did pursue the DSO. And there were some things that just didn't sit well with me. One was they wanted me to work 5 years. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to work 5 more years. That was a sticking issue. To have it change to something and not have the ability to control it. I've been practicing by myself for, at that time, 37 or 38 years. I couldn't resolve myself to that. The numbers they give are so much bigger, and I'm always hesitant to really see how that works, losing control. And then one of the weakest reasons, and some people will say I'm an idiot for this, and other people will say that's the way I do it too, is there's a certain population in your practice that you just carry and help. People with joint problems that you've resolved, but they need to be followed up on. And I couldn't see how that would fit in to something in a corporate setting. I couldn't see how they would allow me to do things. I don't make any money on it. But those relationships are so steadfast, and it is one of the areas where I feel rewarded and appreciated. Mm-hmm. And I just couldn't let that go. I would get this kind of return on the practice. And so that was going to be okay with me. I didn't need to get 5X at those other costs. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Some people are saying, you're just dumb. And other people say, I want to do it that way. There's no right or wrong answer, but that was my experience. Yeah. Is that an answer for you?
Yeah, that's perfect. And I love that you said that, because what you said is true. There is no right or wrong here. And I think everybody who's looking, there comes a point at the end of every orthodontist career where we have to make that decision. Am I going to go right and sell privately? Am I going to go left and sell to corporate if my numbers are big enough? Or am I just going to shut it down? Everybody has to make that decision. Some of the things you're talking about, those are things we have to wrestle with, because you know that if you're going to sell privately, the doctor coming in more than likely is going to take up and love on those patients. There's just going to be a more personal connection there than we may get with what we may see in the OSO or DSO world potentially. So talking about that a little bit, because I get asked this a lot, and it is something I think each orthodontist has to wrestle with, and wherever you land is okay. You have to wrestle with.
There are a lot of factors. If orthodontics is your means to be super wealthy, there's a way of doing it that way. I didn't choose to do it that way, but I did choose to prepare for my retirement from the time I opened my doors. And that's been growing for all those years. And so I could sell at a reasonable number. And maybe that's a message to some of the younger ones, where they don't seem to hear the plan for the retirement thing very well, but you need to.
Yes, for sure. I would agree with you. All right, Stephen, it's your turn. Okay. Are you ready? We all know running and growing an orthodontic practice isn't easy, and technology is supposed to help you, but oftentimes your practice management software doesn't. Some of them are even clunky and need lots of third-party add-ons. That's why I recommend Greyfinch to my startup and existing clients, because Greyfinch is different. Greyfinch is an all-in-one web-based platform that saves you time and boosts your client base, productivity, and bottom line, with no downloads or third-party software needed. It even has tools you can't find anywhere else, like televisits, two-way email and text messaging, a patient self-service hub, and much more. Want to see how it can grow your practice? Visit greyfinch.com/Jill Allen and see why countless leading practices have made the switch. Hey docs, let's talk about Smile Suite, because it's not just another scheduling system. It's a game changer in the world of new patient management. And as a proud Smile Suite partner, I've witnessed the incredible impact it has on practices of all sizes. Smile Suite means your new patient calls and web leads are expertly handled 7 days a week, even during nights and weekends. And they offer top-notch customizable presentation software and seamless post-consultation follow-up. It's like having a secret weapon for your practice's success. Curious? Dive into the revolution at getsmilesuite.com. And don't forget to mention Hey Docs to unlock some extra goodies. Elevate your practice with Smile Suite because every smile deserves a suite of excellence. Now you're in the hot seat. Let's talk about your decision coming out of the Air Force. What were some of the factors that led you to?
Yeah, sure. I think a big part of, making the decision for you do a startup, you do an acquisition really comes down to maybe the market you're looking at. What is the makeup of it? What are opportunities that are there to pursue and what kind of makes sense? I think for my particular decision, also putting in what are the values of the practice that you're looking at if you're wanting to acquire one? Do they align with what you're looking to do? All those are big factors. How do you want to set it up? You can do it a number of ways, but then it's going to come down to where you want to live and what opportunities are there. And are you forced into doing a startup, or is there a practice to acquire and move into? And what is the fit of that? For me and my experience, we had these conversations early on, as early as you can have those, or identify a location of where you want to go. Then you can start cultivating the relationships with maybe an orthodontist who's ready to sell and really see, are the values there? Is it a practice that you're wanting to pursue? And then do you need to pivot and pursue a different route? I think our values ended up being very well aligned. Dr. Donaghey had been practicing here for a long time. He's very entrenched in the community. And so all of those really lined up to how I wanted to practice and what I wanted to do too. And so I think that was really attractive.
Sure.
To see.
Yeah. So I'm wondering if you would give us a peek behind the curtain a little bit, and if you would share maybe what some of those first conversations that you guys were having, what were you trying to work out to see if you aligned or not? Would you mind just sharing some of those? Because again, you guys had this conversation that went on for quite a while, and you both had this gentleman's agreement that we haven't entered into anything yet. We can each step away if we feel like it's not moving in the right direction. Can you talk about you as a doc getting ready to acquire a practice? What were you trying to find out? I know you guys had a relationship a little bit, friends of friends, how that all worked together through your wife, but you didn't actually know each other. So what were you going through and talking through as you were building up to, I think this is the practice for me? I'm sure you were still probably evaluating other opportunities as well.
The details may be a little rusty, but I think a big part of it is just getting to know each other, having those surface level conversations, but then also what is the timing? What does the practice look like going forward? Is it something that I'm interested in from a treatment philosophy standpoint, from the timing standpoint, from the relationship standpoint? Is it a place that I feel like I can see myself? And I think part of it was conversations, but then I would also come and shadow leading up to that as well. Over a few years when I was in town, I would stop by. I was an orthodontic resident just coming to see what the real world looks like. I knew the staff. I knew how they worked and what I was stepping into. So I think the beauty of what happened for us was that we had time that we were working through this and stepping through it that maybe not everybody gets. So I think we probably took a slower route because we just had that luxury. Yep. So a lot of it was figuring out timeline, feeling each other out. How do you practice? What do you like? Conversations.
Yeah.
If I'd known what was going to happen, I would have had him putting on brackets those days he was shadowing. And
Sit down.
Exactly.
But that was fun having him come through. After enough, the staff became a little suspicious as time went on. They're not stupid.
But the shadowing gives you a good feel. You're seeing what's happening. Mm-hmm. And so it's a hands-on experience to, is this a right fit? Yeah. And really taking that information, leaning on mentors and talking to your family are a big part of the process.
Yeah, absolutely. You talked a little bit about timing. And I think that, in my opinion, having talked to many doctors who've been through this, is probably the hardest thing for a senior doc to commit to. I am going to sell and on this date. And for a younger doc coming in to be able to, okay, this will be the date I get the practice. I'm curious, again, you guys had this kind of gentleman's agreement that you were, talking through until we actually got to contractual agreements. But was there ever for you, when you guys were talking about lining up, okay, it's going to be July when I take over, when I come in and it becomes my practice, was there ever a hard conversation about, Jim, you have to commit to, when are you ready to sell this? Because what I have seen over and over again is, so many times I've got my senior docs that are ready to sell, but they just can't pull the trigger. And it's almost like they just drag it out. And then the younger doc feels like they're just being led along. There comes a point where it just goes awry because they're like, I've waited 5 years and you said you're going to sell it and you're not going to sell it. Did you guys have to have a hard conversation about that?
Can I?
Yeah.
Yeah.
A little bit, but not in a great way. It seems like the conversation hasn't gotten to where, how did we actually do it? Stephen's still in Chapel Hill, and we're trying to negotiate the associate agreement. Mm-hmm. And that's when it got serious. And so I employed a well-known orthodontic transition team. The first thing they do is the practice valuation, the associate agreement. And it got dragged out more than we wished because they were not as efficient as I wanted them to be. Stephen had another well-known orthodontic transition team looking at it from his side. He made it clear to me that he wanted to come in, work, and buy the practice in 6 months. But they started saying it might work better if it goes to 9 months. He was going to start at the beginning of July through December or January 1st. They said, why don't you do it March 31st? So I proposed that to him. It didn't seem like that made much difference early, but then the discussion was, I really want to buy the practice. Mm-hmm. So I said to my team, we're going to change it back to what we originally said, to January 1st or December 31st. It didn't make any difference to me. I was encouraged that he wanted it that bad. Mm-hmm. That's how my mantra had always been, once I'm finished, I used to say, I have had no time in my life for my whole life. It's Tuesday at 2:00 in the afternoon. What am I going to be doing? I said that to myself a million times. You got to either go or no go. That's the way we did it. Now, that's a year and a half ago, and I'm still working 2 days a week. We don't know how much longer that's going to go on, but it's been fun. Back to the original question, that was a hesitation, but we resolved it saying the agreement looks good. It makes sense. He's happy with it. I'm happy with it. Now make your decision and do it.
Yeah, I love that.
And I think we always had a good relationship talking through things. If there was a sticking point, we were both on the same page of let's bring it up, talk through it, and work through it. And for people going through this process, you got to go into it knowing you're not going to win every battle. Neither of you are. And if neither of you are, then everybody's winning, or at least it should be. And so I think we had that understanding and knew that. And so it made the process that much better for us to have these crucial conversations and figure out how to meet in the middle.
You have an associate agreement after the evaluation, and it's a document with paragraphs as legal as it could possibly be.
Yes.
And we're looking, and they want to cross out this. They want to cross out this. Finally, I got on the phone with Stephen and I said, this is craziness. They're trying to make this adversarial when we're trying to agree. Yes. Finally, I had to go back to them. I said, y'all are trying to make us disagree. We're trying to agree. Make it happen. That little line of English in that paragraph doesn't mean a thing. It doesn't need to be changed because he says it needs to change. Finish it. And we really had to be that direct with it. Mm-hmm. We were agreeing. They were trying to make it where we couldn't.
I love that. You had to advocate. I think that's a really good takeaway point. You have to advocate for yourselves, even though you may have really smart people working for you. Sometimes you have to lay down the law and be like, nope, I want this to move forward. I don't want this deal to be killed. I've got this great doctor that wants to come in and buy my practice. Stephen, I've got this great practice that I want to purchase, and we've got to make it work. Sometimes the lawyers get involved and the teams get involved, and it's almost like a fight between the lawyers. And the docs are sitting there going, why did I lose this?
If you've gotten to this point, something's clicked. I think, and other people that I've talked to before, usually will tell them too, just have the conversation with the senior doctor, because at the end of the day, y'all do want the same thing, or you want close to that. So have the crucial conversation and be candid about it and talk about it. You'll probably come up with a solution together. At least that was our experience. It made it that much easier for us and really took some of the stress out of it. Even in the associate agreement, we had those conversations early on, laid it out and said, this looks like what our timeline would look like. And we were both okay with that.
Yeah.
So I think that made it easier.
So let's talk about some of the hurdles as you have come into the practice and you're taking over. Let's talk about that from your perspective, coming in and this is my practice and my team now. Talk through that. I know there's a lot that goes on. I'm going to let you talk about what you want to talk about, but
sure. I think some of the biggest hurdles is probably what most new small business owners face at the beginning, especially people coming out of professional school, because I practiced in the Air Force. We didn't do much on the business side of things. And you don't get much business classes, new business classes in a residency standpoint. I was very fortunate. I feel like we did have a curriculum that had a part-time faculty member who had practiced and sold practices, had a pretty regimented schedule, and he would come in and talk to us. And I think that was, for me, a huge benefit and a huge value just to have that exposure that I know a lot of programs don't get. So that was really nice to prepare me for the process as well. And I think the other thing too, though, it's scary to think about because you haven't been in those shoes. But in my situation, I had Dr. Donaghey to lean on. And I think it's so important with those challenges of getting payroll set up, HR issues, a transition, just all of the things. Like, how do I even write a check? What is that? QuickBooks, what is that? All those things that you've never done and you have to keep track of to run a business. We had 6 months overlap and he was going through during those 6 months, look, you're going to need to do this. So that transition time was really nice. I think that may be a big takeaway for people. Like, the transition time can be as beneficial as you want it to be. And you need to lean on those people during that to learn as much as you can. He would go through, hey, I'm paying this. This is what you're going to have to pay going forward. So that was invaluable. Even now, leaning on Dr. Donaghey, be like, hey, what did you do in this situation? Or having just a various group of mentors. Jill, your group helped us with the transition when we were in the associate phase. When I started, were a huge value. You had the institutional knowledge. And so that was really beneficial as well. So really, it's the growing pains of a new small business owner not having much experience and stepping through those little pieces. A big part of it is knowing that you're not the expert of everything. Get the team of experts around you and listen to them. Put the ego aside and say, I don't have all the answers, but let's find the people who can help navigate those new challenges.
Yeah. Part of the fun of being here now is I always tell them my job is to make your job easier. If you need me to see patients all day so that you can be free to do something else, fine. If you want to see only new patients and let me stay in the clinic area, fine. Whatever it takes. It's freed him up when he gets stuck. When he was rebranding, he spent a lot of time on it.
Yes.
The funny thing is he's really good at that. And I'm not. I'm like, yeah, you do that. I'll go take care of the patients. That's fine with me. It's been so rewarding to see him take this thing over. You mentioned staff. So what are we into now? This is through August, 1 year and 8 months. And I have never had one staff member come to me to ask about something or to say, Dr. Stephen's doing it this way. Can you talk to him about this? When I stopped signing the checks, he was the man, and he's been the man ever since. And it's a beautiful thing to watch, and they are his staff. It's really whatever he did to encourage that. They've done a really good job at that.
Yeah. And I was actually just going to ask you, Stephen, about that. Let's talk a little bit about that, because I think that is one of the hardest things when a doc comes into a practice, getting the team on board. So you want to share some of the things that you did that you think really helped?
I can't take credit for a lot of that because a lot of that comes down to a well-retained team here. And that's in large part because the leadership that was here for 38 years, right? And continues to be. That was instilled in them. People in the community, former patients continue to tell us, if you're here and Dr. Donaghey's approved, you got to be good, right? Because everything he does is with thought, right? Everything is carefully planned out and done the right way. And so that's why I'm extremely lucky to be in this practice. And to have the team that we have is in large part to how they've been treated by him and how they've been led by him. And so I think that made it easier for us during the transition point. Nobody has had any issues. Nobody has asked any questions. Everybody has been extremely receptive to somebody else coming in. But then it also goes back to, I think, during this transition point too, in the first few months for myself, it wasn't jump in here and let's make a bunch of changes. Let's observe things. And a lot of times I hear people like, once I get into that practice, I'm going to change X, Y, and Z. Maybe you need to wait a little bit and see how things go, then decide what changes to make. I think that was a huge benefit for us because let's say I started with ownership in January. We didn't really make a lot of big changes. We did, but probably 6-8 months in, we started to roll that out. We had good systems and processes in place. Take the time to look at that, take the time to evaluate that. And then it allowed us to make more thoughtful decisions going forward of what we did need to change. Listen to the staff. Our staff have been here for a long time. They have the institutional knowledge. So listen to them too of what works and what doesn't, so you can make strategic changes going forward. For all that we did 8 months in, we rebranded, we renovated, we went paperless, we changed practice management systems, just to name a few. And we had no real big hiccups. We had good systems in place and we took the time to really
I slept well throughout it all.
You're like, not on my watch, but on his watch. We're good.
I don't mean that hands off. I've been involved in everything, but not in the decision making. You want to change systems. He did that research. And so it's okay. I got to learn a new system. It's great. No problem.
Dr. Donaghey's been all in. He could say, I chose this path because I didn't want to deal with that, but he's been all in. We went paperless. He's right there at the computer typing away and never skipped a beat. So I think, and that's all in how we roll it out. I think from the transition point to handling the staff, we took the time to prepare them. My wife is in communications. So prepared talking points or messaging, whether we're talking to patients in the office or you run into somebody outside, how do we handle that? So we're all singing from the same songbook, right?
Yes.
And I think that's super important to remember that aspect. It's not just hanging a sign in the waiting room or sending an email saying, look at our new doctor. There needs to be more thought put into that for it to be rolled out well.
Oh, that's great. So as we start to wrap up, you guys have given us so much great information. I'm wondering if you'd each be willing to share your top 3 pieces of advice for someone looking to sell or buy a practice.
Which way do you want to go first?
Let's start with
age before view or age before radio voice. His voice is just blowing me away here.
I know.
I appreciate you letting me know you would ask this, and I'll disclose that I've thought about this before. But the first for a transition is have that practice valuation. There were numbers on top of numbers on top of numbers. Once we gave them all the numbers, they wanted more numbers. I was astounded, but it really gave us an absolutely firm basis for conversation. I don't want to say negotiation because it really wasn't much of a negotiation. If we had more time, we could talk about the things we negotiated, but get the practice valuation. That'd be one. Second would be, in that process, be open to suggestion, or even with the number of the valuation, there may be reasons for changing that. Even in the associate agreement and salary and benefits, there may be things that you or your team don't know that he and his team do know. Be open to suggestion and don't take offense by it. The third one would be just have complete disclosure. If you try to hide something, it's going to show up somewhere, and that's going to compromise the integrity of the whole deal and the whole relationship. The doctor said, drop your drawers. That's what we did. Yep. This is what I got. This is who I am. This is what we can bring. And so there are no surprises with debts or hidden accounts or siphoning money. It's just complete disclosure.
I could not agree with you more. I hope listeners, especially my senior docs, are thinking about this. You just have to be super transparent, as transparent as you can be.
I would say find somebody who aligns with your values and how you want to practice. If you find somebody like that, get them to stay. Work with them. I think for me, it's afforded opportunities. If I need to take a day off or do something with family, Dr. Donaghey's here and he's been here. We don't even skip a beat. We're so lucky with that. Like he was saying, put your ego aside and just know that you're two people trying to work through something and you need to have that compromising mentality. Also, take that time to wait to change some systems and processes, observe what's going on and lean on the staff, lean on the institutional knowledge that's there to help make the best decision going forward. I think are three good takeaways.
Yeah, that's great. You guys, this has been just so wonderful. And I know we could do a whole nother episode on, there's so much more that we just barely scratched the surface on what this looks like. But I just really appreciate you guys being vulnerable and talking a little bit about each of your sides, because there are so many doctors in your shoes. And Stephen, I talk to so many doctors that desperately want to do an acquisition. I do a lot of startups, but if you can find a great practice to purchase, do that. I think so many times we're left with doing startups because there just are not practices to purchase or practices that are so overpriced because docs aren't willing to, Donaghey, be willing to go through that process of what is my practice really worth? What am I bringing to the table? I appreciate you guys sharing this. If somebody wanted to just maybe talk to either one of you about maybe getting some advice or just having a peer to reach out to, would you be willing to share a way that somebody could get a hold of you if you're comfortable with that?
Absolutely.
I'm fine to, people can email us.
Email is probably the best. If it goes further than that, we can talk about cell phones.
Perfect. Yeah. I'll have Jordan put it in the show notes for us. So anybody that's listening, if you want to reach out to Dr. Donaghey or Dr. Oliver, just shoot them an email. I know these guys, they will be happy to give you some extra advice. As I like to finish up, one of the ways that I like to do it is with and I think we'll just go in the same order that we have done the whole show. If you guys are ready, Jim, I'm going to start with you with the speed round. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
I can't wait for that.
If you could start with any business right now, what would it be?
I've been unsuccessful at answering that same question to myself. I'm a one-horse pony, and all I knew with orthodontics, anything I've ever invested in besides orthodontics is completely and totally gone belly up. But I will tell you where my interest lies. My interest lies in the epidemic of poor metabolic health in this country and the factors associated with it. I study it and read it. If there was some way to start to communicate that the food industry and the standard diets we eat are making people sick, I would love to get that across to people. That is my thing right now.
I love that. All right, Stephen, how about you?
I lived over in Italy for 3 years and got really into Italian wines, and we toured around a bunch. I would open a winery. Probably wouldn't make me a lot of money, but I'd have fun doing it.
You'd be drinking some good wine, though.
Please. I told you he was a lot smarter than me.
All right, Jim, what's the best investment you've ever made?
Like I said, I'm a one-horse pony. And starting my retirement plan early. That is the only investment that ever worked for me.
Yeah.
I learned early about compound interest and geometric progression and stayed with the game. And that's why I was able to do this.
Stephen?
I would say for me, my wife, she's a great partner. She owns a small business as well. Our dinner time conversations maybe look a little different than other people, but also Dr. Donaghey as a partner in the practice too. Yeah. All that goes hand in hand for me.
I love that. How do you handle work-related stress?
I wish I had a perfect answer for that, but what I don't do is bring it home. To me, there's an electric fence between the office and home. I would tell my wife what was going on, and if there was something major, we discuss it. But I didn't come home raving because we had a bad day at work or that we were having a bad month. I left that here. Exercise a lot and always have. Maybe that's the physical release for that. I just had a division between work and home. Yeah. Raising 4 kids, there was enough stress at home. Sometimes when I stayed a little late at the office, so just that division there.
That's great.
For me, like living overseas, I really got into cycling. So I definitely like to do that. Running is a big stress reliever. And then I think for both of us, spending time on Mobile Bay, being out on the water is a good decompression point too. So
That's
For sure. Yeah.
awesome. All right. What's one trend in the industry you're excited about?
Aesthetics.
Mm.
We've really changed the way we design our treatment for improved smiles. People who practice know what I'm talking about. Increase incisor display, broader arches, better smile arc, and it just is making a gigantic difference in the way we approach things. You have to retain it, but it makes some beautiful results and some happy people. That's the change for me.
How about you, Stephen?
I think for me, the digital workflow and the customizable capabilities that we have, I think for our practice, it's very high touch. We're very personalized in the care that we deliver. So I think that allows us to focus on the aesthetics and get these results that are beautiful. That's really exciting to see, and how you can translate it to the patients and get them excited about it too. Yeah, that's really exciting, I think, for both of us to see it.
I love that. And as we finish up, what's the best or the most valuable piece of advice you would give someone just starting their career?
Start your retirement early and be diligent with it. You have chosen a service as your career. Be a servant to each of your patients, be a servant to your staff, be a servant in the community. You have to focus on service.
I think at my stage, getting that tribe of mentors that you can lean on and be curious, ask good questions, and be open to feedback all throughout the process. I've been extremely lucky, even from the alumni network at UNC, that everybody always wants to help each other. And so we should all help each other. Email us if you have questions. People helped us, and we want to give back in that sense too.
Yeah.
Sure.
Guys, this has been such a treat. Like I said, I've been looking forward to this for a while now. So I was so excited to do this with you today. So thank you for being on Hey Docs. I just wish you the best. I know you're going to continue to do big things in the practice. Thanks for being on today.
Thank you,
Thank
Jill.
you.
It's such
Yeah.
a pleasure.
Appreciate it.
See ya.